are looking to build economy within Repl.it. I talked about the network and how people interface with each other's REPLs and all that. Having an economy built within that network would be really cool.
Hey, before we get started, we'd like to announce that we've opened up a merch store. Now you can rock a hoodie to show your support for the show. If you're a member of our Patreon, you get a 15% discount code. Now let's get on to the conversation with Faris. But remember, the full episode is only available to our members. Head over to shop.devtools.fm. Hello, welcome to the DevTools-fm podcast. This is a podcast about developer tools and the people who make them. I'm Andrew, and this is my co-host, Justin.
Hey everyone. Today we're really excited to be joined by Faris Masad. Faris is one of the founding engineers at repl.it. And for those of you who might not know, repl.it is a service for quickly spinning up a REPL environment to do sort of coding on the fly. Maybe I butchered that description. So Faris, would you like to tell our audience a little bit more about yourself? And then maybe after that, talk a little bit about what repl.it is?
Yeah, I'm Faris. As they said, I'm a founding engineer at repl.it. Today I work mostly in the core product, so that's like the IDE environment, if you can call it an IDE. And yeah, repl.it is an online environment for authoring software in a way that doesn't make you want to shoot yourself. If you look at the usual way people write software, you go online, you download a bunch of tools. Like you download your code editor, or maybe even you start with code spaces. But then you have to figure out what to do, right? Like you have to figure out how do I even run my code? Like what does running entail? What do I need to get into a state that I can run code? I remember my first experiences with coding early on. I guess it was Visual Basic at first, and that was pretty fun. It was a really good experience. You download. I think it was Visual. What was it? I think it was Visual Studio. I can't remember. But you download a Microsoft product, and you have this UI that tells you what to do, basically. And you draw your buttons and you attach an event listener to them, and it was pretty cool. But then I wanted to do real development. I think I wanted to try Python at the time because I saw Google was using it, and I downloaded Python, or so I thought. And I downloaded a bunch of editors because there's different recommendations, and I just didn't know what to do. I followed 15 different tutorials. I set Python in my path 6 different times, and I still type Python main.py, and it's it's not the thing that I'd expect. And and Amjad, actually, the reason repl.it is here is because Amjad was just sick of this. He was in university at the time, and he basically noticed that every other lesson they spend it just setting up the environment. They don't code, they're installing stuff, and they're removing stuff, and they're making sure the previous student's environment isn't clashing with theirs. And I went through the same experience. I actually quit university because of this. Dropped out. I was I'm not learning how to build things. I guess it was useful for the theoretical aspects, and I went and pursued that on my own. Followed some curriculums, but it takes a long time before you get to the part where you're building things.
Yeah, it reminds me of my story. I tried to teach myself programming in high school. I was interested in it from an abstract perspective, though I'd never had any direct. I didn't have like a programming class in school or anything. But I mean, not knowing, anything about programming or whatever, I just like went to the Barnes and Noble and bought a book on, it was like C++ programming, and tried to like do something with it, and like I like failed miserably. And then when I got in college and it's like got a class and they like showed you how to, or they had the environment all set up and it's like, yeah, open the editor and then start and like type this in and run it. And I was like, oh wow, this is actually really like so much easier than I thought. But that barrier of entry is a real thing that I think as experienced programmers, it's really easy to forget how hard it was to start as a beginner because there's so much stuff.
It's not only easy to forget, it's we like it. It's like we love that shit. Like you talk to programmers, they can they can spend 10 hours talking to you about how they rice their environment and all these things, and nothing's wrong with that. Like you gain productivity, but that should be like the default.
Sure.
You shouldn't have to spend your teenage years ricing your Vim environment so that when you're in the industry, you're productive, right? Because you can't go back and like rice your environment after you're in industry. Like it takes a lot of time unless like you have the affinity to do that, I guess. But yeah, we're used to it and we like it, and it's like Stockholm syndrome. A lot of people get pissed at Repl.it, like professionals, because of these things. And we're adding a lot of power, a lot of customizability on Repl.it, and we can talk about that later. But like the default is you go into the code editor and you hit the run button, and it's like you require a node package or Python or whatever. It installs it for you when you hit run. Like you don't have to go through the pain of interfacing with a package manager. Yet, when a professional lands on Repl.it, they're used to doing that. I've observed behavior where they jump to the shell rather than like clicking that big green run button. They like npm init and like npm install whatever and all that. Whereas you bring in someone who hasn't been conditioned to that world yet, and who would naturally be approaching things from first principles, and their intuition is like to write a few lines of code or go learn how to write those few lines of code and hit that big green run button. It's like it's an expected thing for them. And we do a lot of that. It's like subtle, and you don't notice it if you're new. If you're a seasoned programmer, it might get on your nerves a bit until like you are comfortable with not having to do your usual rituals. Yeah, there's all these subtle things. I remember reading this Reddit post. It's like, how can I make VS Code save like Repl.it? Like they're like, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago we got rid of the save, the idea of save. Like you don't need to save. Like just things are saved. You just run. And yeah, like kids that grew up on Repl.it and like are going to industry or starting to learn like the professional way. They just expect things to work, and they don't.
Yeah, my fiance's sister is learning programming, and a lot of her classes were done through Repl.it, and like it was just like you said, like she got straight into coding and like didn't have to worry about environments, didn't have to worry about like GCC, whatever, like those weird incantations we all know.
Yeah.
And then she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna like try to do this locally. Like it's like the logical next steps. Like, oh, this is gonna be easy." And then all of a sudden, we're dealing with like, oh, C++ 2017 doesn't have the right blah 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 blah. and just like instantly just off the cliff of like, oh well, programming's very, very hard. But repl.it really changes that. So how does it like actually work behind the scenes? Because it's kind of this like magical experience of you open a tab in your browser, you go to repl.it, you choose a language, and you start coding. But like none of that code is actually running in the browser. So what's really happening there?
So in the past, all that code used to run in the browser. I can talk about the history of repl.it a little bit before we get there. In repl.it like is a passion project for Amjad, who is the CEO and founder of repl.it. He started in college, as I mentioned, and he just he saw that Google Docs like is a thing, and he was like, wait, you can like write prose in your browser, you can like do word processing, and that's like pretty complex. And he thought like, what does it take to run code? And so yeah, I remember his prototype was like pretty shitty. It's like a text box and a submit button, and it basically is a JavaScript eval, right? And I think it was just before like JSBin or whatever got released, and all these like tools, and like everyone was like trying to like caught onto that idea almost at the same time. It happens a lot. It's very common with tools. And yeah, everything was running in the browser. First language Amjad added, I think, after JavaScript was Scheme, and I think he used the project called Biwa Scheme, which is like Scheme in JavaScript. He also did write his own Lisp as well,
Rite of passage.
as one would, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and then he continued to add languages until eventually like he was like, okay, Python. What is it? Like he added, these esoteric languages that transpile to JavaScript, like brainfuck and like a bunch of these. And yeah, he got to Python and was like, what now? And he came across this project by the LLVM people called mscripton, which compiled C to ASM.js, the precursor to WASM, or the predecessor, sorry. And yeah, everything was running in the browser for like 4 years, I think, between like 2011 and early 2015. And late maybe 2014, containers were like all the noise, like Docker. People were like, yeah, it's like, this is amazing, like sandboxing and reproducibility and like deterministic environments and all that. And I'm just like, wait, this is great. Like I can, and it's like really lightweight. It's like C groups. It's not like a VM where it uses a lot of resources, basically emulates everything. It's a very thin layer. And so he put that in a server, and the code actually, like I looked at it not long ago, the initial code is like very simple, like WebSocket connection. You have something that spawns a Docker container and then just gives you a session to that, and there's like a simple JSON API to like run things and stuff. It was pretty cool. And maybe 6-7 months later, Kubernetes got released. So it was pretty cool. Like he built Kubernetes before Kubernetes. And yeah, so what happens today is basically the same thing. You open a project. We call it a REPL. People from the Lisp community and stuff like that, like they don't like the fact that we call it REPL because it's like a project. It can be anything. So yeah, you do that. You grab a token from our main servers or like CRUD app, and then you take that token and hit our evaluation API with a WebSocket. And There's a lot of internal stuff that goes on with like distributed systems and all that to know where you should go and if it's a multiplayer session, then you're like attaching to an existing container, and we have a protocol between the client and the container, and basically it has all these like primitives for talking to the back end. We have like services like file system service. We have a service for like autocomplete and language intelligence and all that. We have a service for the debugger and running and packaging. All of this runs as like PID1, so like it's the init process that talks to the client, which is pretty cool. And yeah, that's it. I guess there's a the containers shared. The protocol is like multiplayer first, so it has like support for loopback and broadcast and things like that. Yeah, I think that's like the core of it.
We did an episode recently with a guy that I attended Recurse Center with. His name's Paul Butler, and Paul and one of his friends started a startup called Drifting in Space, where they're trying to build like a part of like what this infrastructure is. Is that like, oh, I want a long-lived session, a persistent long-lived session on an instance that I can sort of come back to. But it's interesting to hear about like how much of this infrastructure that you really had to sort of build out from scratch. So that's kind of it's fun insight.
Yeah, maybe if like we were to start today, we would use Kubernetes, but maybe. But there's all these like guarantees that we have, and like to make sure we don't have like duplicate containers and like routing and all these things. I don't know if I think Gitpod uses Kubernetes.
There's an interesting parallel here. So talking about like custom infrastructure versus Kubernetes, that I feel like aligns really nicely with the conversation of repl.it, that idea that programming could be simpler, that it could be simpler to approach. And the sort of like scaled complexity that we see, especially in the infrastructure tooling world. So like Kubernetes aims to make a lot of problems a lot simpler and give you some vast capabilities that like would be pretty hard to build yourself manually. But at the same time, it's hard. It is rough. It's a lot of complexity that your entire organization has to eat, and there's a lot of concepts to understand and everything. And it's not, it's not the repl.it of the infrastructure world, right? It takes a lot of context and a lot of time just sitting with it to really understand the edge cases and how to configure it and all that other stuff.
Yeah, it might not like have the order of magnitude or approach to repl.it of like abstracting things away, but it is in a way like an improvement over running your own VM orchestration infrastructure or your own like scaling or sandboxing and reproducibility type things.
Yeah, I almost think of like serverless as being closer to like repl.it when you're thinking about the infrastructure world. It's like I just want to focus on the thing that I'm doing,
right,
and not all this like auxiliary stuff that has to happen to make it.
But serverless also has like all these caveats, right?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
No state, like you don't use memory, like things like that.
Yeah, so you just mentioned Gitpod. So how does repl.it compare to services like Gitpod and Codespaces? Like what differentiates it?
We always like to say this, but like putting an IDE in the browser is have you heard of like the term horseless carriage? Yeah, so like it's you're basically taking the same thing and you're putting it in the browser. Now there's like a lot of advantages to that, portability and so maybe reproducibility is better and all these things. There's preset environments, I guess, and if you If you have a nice like internal DevTools team, they'll write your I don't know, what is it, like a container config file for you for code spaces and all that. And I think they're focused on the status quo, and we're trying to leapfrog. So we're like every time we add something, it took us like a couple of years before we were like, okay, let's add a file tree. It seems silly, but we're like, that there must be something better for like project organization. And now there's like these I forgot what I saw it, but there's this editor in like programming language that basically tells you there's no files. It's just this massive program document. You organize it whatever way you want.
Kind of makes me think of there's this language called Unison Web, where it's like the code is actually all stored in a database, and you just have a little scratch pad that you can just like run some code, and then you like when you quote unquote commit it, it like stores it in the database, and like you can query for all your code or whatever. It's like an interesting
cool.
abstraction of how to model that.
Yeah, there's I guess Darklang
Yeah.
might be in the same field. And I guess we're, if I had to put us somewhere on some spectrum of like known tools, I guess we're somewhere between like code spaces and Darklang as a programming environment. So yeah, I think we're trying to leapfrog, but we're also backwards compatible. And like Darklang, you have to use Darklang, but on Repl.it, like you can use anything. I'd say that's the main thing. And in terms of like programming, but there's this aspect of Repl.it, and that's why we really believe in it more than anything, is like the network. And we have a pretty vibrant community. It's really fun to see kids like, chatting about code and sharing their like, small programs. And you can go to like, their profiles, when they're like 10 or whatever, like they're building like tic-tac-toe and like a coin flip and blah, blah, blah. And then, 5 years later or 2-3 years later, actually like it's amazing how fast these kids progress. And I think partly because of Repl.it, you'd see them like writing all these like complex programs, writing their own programming language. And yeah, it gets pretty intense pretty quickly. And they share this code with each other. It's like open source, but fun and not fun. I guess the better word is like welcoming, and it's really cool. I don't know how to describe it. It's like hanging out with your friends online, truly.
Yeah, it's truly amazing how low the barrier to entry has gotten in programming. Because like back when my dad was learning to program, it was like, well, you could go buy a book, you could learn in isolation, you could maybe run some programs, maybe they work. And like even back when I was learning, like Code Academy had just come out, and like the barrier to learning like web development had started to lower. But like me trying to go and learn like C++ or any of these like integrated on my machine things, still super hard. And it's really cool to see that Repl.it is changing that.
Yeah. I also like got started again in Code Academy, and I did work there for a summer as a QA. It was like my first like tech job, I guess. I worked in IT, but I don't think that counts. And it's pretty cool using Code Academy. Is amazing, and I think I'd like if Repl.it had a guided experience, sort of like Code Academy, and like we're already doing it with our onboarding, and it's getting better soon. But I'd like this to be like a trove of like lessons and courses, but more focused on like building rather than learning what a variable is.
Yeah. There's this really magical moment when you're starting out and you have a tool like Repl.it or something where you're enabled, but you still don't really know the shape of the environment that you're in, where
Yeah.
the limitations of what you can build, just you don't know, right? You don't know about all the difficulties. You don't have all these like frictions to like, oh no, that's way too much work. I'm not even going to try to do that. It's just like, you're like, oh, I wonder how you'd build a programming language. And you just like start like hacking with stuff and like, the sort of ideas of like what constitutes a good programming language and sort of like what their shape should be and or even the sort of like long-term level effort to like build a mature programming language is not something that's in your head. So you have this like almost permission and freedom to explore topics that are like, one from the outside might consider way out of your area of depth. But the only thing that it really takes is a really fast feedback loop and to feel like you have the control over your environment, that you kind of understand what your sandbox, if you will, like the area in which you're playing. And I think that promotes a lot of really powerful learning where, as we were saying earlier, a lot of other people who were like getting into programming just got frustrated. Like, this thing's not in my path. I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know how to move from here, like.
Yeah. It's overwhelming is the right word for getting into like a non-sandbox.
Let's focus more now on like what things people have built using Repl.it. So do you have any like go-to projects that you can point to where you're like, wow, that it's crazy that they were able to build that in Repl.it?
Yeah, there's a few off the top of my head, like let's see. So here's the catch. Most things built on Repl.it are in this like hobbyist state, so they're not quite like a production thing, but they're like really fun tools. I think the most fun things are like just like games kids build, multiplayer games. There's this fun thing that people do with Repl.it. There's Minecraft speedrunning, and the way you get better at that is by, how Minecraft is like generated, and there's like a random seed, and so they use Repl.it to find seeds that make their speedrun faster. And so like they run through all these like iterations to find like a glitch in the seeding algorithm so that they can speedrun pretty quick. And I think there's like a couple of pretty impressive results that came out of that.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. What else? The first thing that blew my mind was this chat app that a kid built. I think he was 12 or 13. And what he built was a terminal app. Repl.it now has hosting. Like you open a port and you get a URL and all that instantly. Before that, we only supported terminal apps. And you could share them and publish them to the community still and all that. We actually had a website that's called like REPL Run, and then like your REPL, and it's like just a web page with a terminal. It's pretty cool. So yeah, it's a terminal chat app, and the way it worked is that you take their terminal app, you fork it, and you run it on your own, and then everyone talks to everyone through like a request, like a P2P request thing through their REPLs, and Yeah, it's a crazy like chat app. That's just like in the terminal, distributed. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
For someone 12 or 13, that's
yeah,
huge. That's
yeah,
Yeah.
like,
yeah. That same kid built like a load balancer on Replit.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely goes back to the theme that we've explored on this podcast a lot of constraints breed creativity, and these kids being constrained by repls found ways to be
Yeah,
very, very creative.
yeah, yeah. 100%. Yeah, REPLs are cool. A lot of kids just like build languages and REPLs. Yeah, there's all these like utility apps that like especially like kids are we're starting to see like kids selling these things. So yeah, like a kid would build like a recipe thing, and they'd go like sell it to the neighborhood like moms and dads. Like I don't know.
So, like, how would that work? Or is it like a terminal app, or like
No,
with it
so
has a
now
GUI?
we support like hosting, and so like there's all these like front end uh, web apps
Oh,
basically.
cool.
When we first released web apps, actually that kid works with us right now. When we first released web apps, one of the kids wrote a scheduling web app for his school, and he was trying to sell it to different districts and different schools, and
Wow.
that was pretty cool. Yeah, his name's Shane. He's pretty cool. He's a support engineer with us right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Repl.it is not only taking down the barriers to entry of like getting into coding, but it's also kind of taking the barrier of entry to like distributing your code and like hosting
Right.
it too. That's super
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. I'm working on a project to bring that more closer to what production feels like without, having to go through the pain of like understanding production and things like that. So it's just like, basically like publish this version under, I pick the CRL. Because now it's like your development environment is the same as your production environment. A lot of kids get around that by like forking the REPL, and that's their production, and then they basically just push things to it. But if it's like in one place, it's better. I think hosting is like a distribution channel. Is one of many distribution channels that we eventually want to build. Like you should be able to build mobile apps on your phone, build them, and then like push them to the app store, things like that.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I mean, these all sounds like pretty hard problems to solve. I mean, on the face of it, it's like, oh yeah, this would be too bad.
Yeah.
But then you dig into any of these things. So we've talked a lot about like sort of the history of how Repl.it is developed and sort of your role in it and just some of the projects that have been contained there so far. But when you think about the future of Repl.it, what do you think that entails in as much as you can share? And is there anything that you're all working on currently that you can share that you're excited about?
Yeah, as I mentioned, that like collaborative coding and like a better, even like async collaborative experience, I think is a big thing for me personally. Something that I'm passionate about, and like I enjoy working on. But like even more, I think transformative is is the fact that we are looking to build an economy within Repl.it. I talked about the network and how people interface with each other's REPLs and all that. I think having an economy built within that network would be really cool. So like I can provide like a payment API for you, and charge you, right? As a REPL like creator, and I can create an environment that is that enables like multiplayer features, right? And like you could use that as an API, and then like we have this it's not maybe it's maybe crypto, maybe not, like thing where you exchange value based on that, like maybe by API call or whatever. We have a bunch of prototypes in that space that are really exciting. And just like one click everything, one click payment, one click ads if you want. Like it should be like one click databases. Should be really easy to do a lot of those. I think, just like naturally like SDKs, and in a maybe not lock-in fashion too. I think it's totally possible to do it. So we're already like gonna release some stuff really soon. I don't know how much I'm supposed to share, but I hope it's okay. But we like I think the first thing that you might see come out from repl.it is in the economy aspect is making a post like sort of like a freelance thing. I want X and Y, and can someone build it for me? And they just give you a REPL and you pay them. I think that's like very easy to build. There's like an operational cost for it that's very high, but it'll be worth it.
Yeah, this goes back to something you said earlier. You said that y'all tend to look at what people are building and what they're hacking on, and use that to inform sort of the features that you build. And you said that there's a kid who built a schedule who like wanted to sell it to different school districts. So it's like there's an obvious signal here that like this is probably an interesting area of exploration. I'm sure there's a lot of enterprising folks out there who will be able to take pretty good advantage of this. I think the interesting challenge will be in the sort of like moderation space, because you kind of get into the Roblox sort of area of like development and kids and monetization and that can get
it gets pretty rough,
hard to navigate. But from the broader ecosystem perspective, like being able to spit up a monetized app really quickly with like very little infrastructure is, that could be huge. That could really change the game for a lot of people. So excited to see what y'all do with that.
Yeah, I hope it works out. I think, it's gonna change the software world if it works.
Okay, so last question before we move on to tooltips. This is a kind of like a general question that we ask everybody that comes on the show, like what is the future of the space they work in? But what do you think the future of development is? I think I kind of know your answer now, but do you think like tools like repl.it will become the standard and a local host will die? Well, that's it for this week's free portion of the episode. If you want to listen to the full conversation with Faris, head over to our Patreon and become a member. For just $5 a month, you can help support the show and help us get to our goal of delivering content weekly. Thanks for listening.